Welcome back. In the previous video, we have completed the setup of our To-Do application template with basic HTML and Angular modules. In this video, we will be starting our first programming task on UI. It is create To-Do. So to create To-Do, user need to fill the data in To-Do form, and on submit the form, UI application will call the Spring Boot backend post call to create the To-Do. Let's start the coding. First of all, we need to add the reactive forms module and HTTP client module at the imports section of the app module.ts file. Reactive forms module to create the reactive forms and HTTP client module to call the HTTP API. After adding required modules, we need to generate or create the HTTP service file or to-do model file. HTTP service file will have the logic to call the post API, and to-do model will have the structure same as backend response for to-do. So now we have service and to-do model file in place, and in the screen we can see backend response of all to-dos, where one object of to-do contains the fields ID, name, description, completed, date created, last updated, and we also require the same fields in our model. So now let's start updating our model file. Now let's update the HTTP service file. So in this HTTP service file, this is our endpoint backend service call, and we know our backend service is running on port 8080, but you can see like I'm not calling port 8080 from our front end code. So it means whenever this we will call the post call, it will take our front end port 4200, but we have already set up proxy in the previous video. So what will happen, it will automatically redirect our call to port 8080, and we are taking one to do object from our forum, from this UI. When we click submit, it will come in this service file, and we are sending this object to the service. Now our service is ready to take the HTTP calls, but still we need to work on our UI form, or we can say our reactive form, to call the API. So I will start coding, but if you feel stuck anywhere, you come to this application way2programming.com, and here is the full stack link is there, so it will redirect automatically currently to the to do full stack application, but you have to see in the future heading and then come to the step create to do, and here we have all the steps one by one. So let's start coding. As of now, we have created to-do forum. It is a type of form group, and we are taking the help of form builder class. It is providing us the ability to create the reactive forum using this group function. And here we have four attribute: id, name, description, completed. But from the UI we need currently during creation only to do name and description. So if you will see, these two property we have binded into the UI, name and description, but by mistake we binded two times. So let's remove one and then Alt Shift Tab to format the code. And this ID is not required during creation because it is maintained by the database with Spring Boot. And completed, we are manually making it false when we create the request or when we send the request. So by default we will consider it as a false since it is the task. So we will consider when we create the task, so it is not completed by default. Okay, so next we will be starting submitting the form. So when we click this submit, and we also remove this type from button to submit. So when we click, automatically this function will get called. So now let's starting handling the submit form. Before that, we need to remove this to do empty class because we already have this interface in place. I think I have by mistake created this, so let's remove. And we also I think I by mistakenly imported also here. We need the interface from the model, not from this empty class. Now let's proceed on the remaining coding part. We have handled on submit function, and in this coding we are saying if any error from the forum, any validation error from the forum, so return from here, do nothing. So currently we can see here no validation present, but we have to make one field as a required field, that is name field. We'll do that in further video. And we are taking the value of the form, creating another object, and then creating our to do request. And in the to do request we can see we don't have all the properties, only we have name, description, completed. So that, and we also changed our interface with some property with question mark, means these are the optional property for us during the creation, so that we won't get the compilation error. If we will have without question mark, it means whenever we will create the object with this type, we always need to provide that attribute. So, and then finally we are having we have injected our HTTP service to call the HTTP create to do function that we created earlier. Let's try and see if our call is going to the backend service. Yeah, our call is going fine. We can see headers. We can still see we are calling our SAM port where our front-end application is running, but in the backend it called the port 8080 through the proxy setup, and it is our payload from the our request. And we can see completed is going with false. This is the data coming from our forum, and then we got in the return back response. In the next video we will be working on the get to do task.